We work a lot. Maybe you saw a recent report in the newspaper that says that the typical American work week is now just a shade under 50 hours. So as Americans, we work more hours per week than any other workforce in any industrialized nation of the world. And we have less vacation time than most other countries in the industrialized world. We work a long time. Most of us start our employment when we are teenagers and don't retire until we are in our 70s. All of which is to say that a major part of our lives is spent on the job. You take 168 hours per week. If we work on average 50 hours per week, that is roughly 30% of our total time that goes to employment. Now, by contrast, if we come to church for 3 hours a week, that's going to be a longer service today, that comes to 1.7% of our 168 hours in the week. That means then that we spend more time by far on the job than we do at church, and outside of our home and family, that is most where we live out all that it means to be Christians. So let's do a survey. Let's find out what kind of work we do. You ready? How many are teachers or in education? Okay, that's the beginning of the school year. How many are in sales? How many are students? Any students up here? Okay, a lot of students. All right, how many are retired? How many? No, not too many. All right, how about self-employed? A lot of self-employed. Unemployed? How about, how many work for the government? Nobody works for the government? Oh, whoa, one person works for the government. Okay. Wow, you've got a heavy load there, carrying all 300 million of us on your shoulders. How about in construction or manufacturing? How about homemakers? Caregivers? Maybe the same category there. What about in the financial world, banking or money people? All right, we need you. That's good. Did we do healthcare? How many are in healthcare? Doctors, nurses. Wow, we can be sick here. This is a safe place. This is good. How about lawyers, judges, paralegals in the law industry? All right, not too many, but we're okay being sick. We just can't have legal troubles. What have I left out? What other categories are there? How many truck drivers? You get together with a government worker over here, we're in good shape. All right, what else? Fast food, okay. How many eat fast food for a living? Yeah, you got a monopoly going on here. How about entertainment, broadcasting, the arts, music, dance? All right. The category, I'm going to close this out. What else? Information technology, all you really smart people. All right, good, that's a lot. The nonprofit sector, how many nonprofit people? That doesn't mean personally, we're talking about work here, all right? Your job, that's great. All right, well, those are the things that we do. The question is, why do we do them? Why do we work? And you might imagine that one day you inherit unexpectedly a huge amount of money, or you win the lottery, or there's an out-of-court settlement and you have this bonanza of money. And one of the first questions that you will be asked is, are you going to quit your job? And if you have an instant answer, yes, then in all probability why you work is to get the money. And that is certainly part of why we work. But as Christians, it seems that we can come up with a better and a bigger answer, starting out that we work to be like God. After all, we were created in the image of God, and the greatest fulfillment in life is to be like Him. And God is a worker. Not because He needs the money. He does not need the money. But because that's who God is. That's the way that God is, and work is what God does. So when you open the Bible at the very beginning in Genesis 1 through 3, God created the heavens and the earth. He had these great ideas on his drawing board, and in 6 days, he turned his ideas into reality. On the seventh day, he rested, and sometimes we talk maybe too much about his seventh day off and forget that he put in a lot of work and accomplished a great deal in those first 6 days. But he didn't create and quit. There are some people that say that what I like to do is start new ideas, new ventures, new concepts, new businesses, but I don't like to sustain them. I don't like to maintain the project, so somebody else has got to do that, but not God. God not only created our world, but he sustains our world as well. The New Testament says in Colossians 1:16 and 17, by him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things were created by him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. Do you ever feel like where you work, that if you didn't show up, everything would fall apart? Do you ever feel like for your family, if just one day you stayed in bed and let everybody fend for themselves, that the whole family system would collapse without you? You're just like God. He's got the same situation. The world wouldn't work if God didn't hold it together. So he not only created, but he maintains. And every day that we go to work, every day that we do good, everything we create and maintain is being like God. God works, we work. Good for God and good for us. But that's not the only reason. There are many reasons why we work, including to glorify God. So to glorify God is to make God look good, to boost God's reputation, which is often tarnished. And in the first century world, there were few places where the reputation of God would have been as tarnished as Corinth. Corinth was actually a pretty wicked and violent place, loaded with debauchery, illicit sex, paganism, and idolatry, so much so that they had a word for it. They said when you were talking about a party city at its worst, that kind of behavior was to Corinthianize. And whether you actually went to Corinth or not, it was a word to describe the worst of behavior, paganism at its most pagan. However, in Corinth, the worst of behavior was not limited to the pagans. In fact, Christians in the church were sometimes worse than the pagans. So you can read in the New Testament, in 1 Corinthians 5 and 6, and blush while you read about a church member who was involved in an illicit sexual affair with his stepmother. Or you can read about Christians who go to court and sue each other before pagans. They can't figure it out among themselves, so they ask the pagans to resolve it. And members of the Corinthian church who spent their money going to local brothels and paying male and female prostitutes. Okay, so imagine. Imagine that you are in Corinth and that you have a job in one of the shops there and that you're a Christian. A Christian who says that you want to enhance the reputation of God, but you also want to be accepted by other people, including your coworkers. One day, toward the end of the shift, there's a conversation that you hear, and they're all planning to get together after work. And then someone invites you to go along. And as a Christian, you know immediately what that means. It means that they'll close up the shop and they'll lock the door, and then that they'll head over to the temple district. It'll probably start out with drinking some of the temple beer until everyone gets high, if not drunk. And then around to some of the idols and some dances and rituals of worship. And then the evening perhaps ending up going to some of the local brothels to visit prostitutes, some of whom were considered to be part of the worship and actually plied their prostitution within the temple. And you're hesitating what to say, And one of your coworkers misunderstands the hesitation and says, hey, if money's the issue, don't worry about it. I'll buy dinner. It's on me tonight. And you know what that means. It means that you go over by the temple and you order a steak, and your coworker will pay for that steak. However, that steak is cut off the carcass of an animal that earlier that afternoon was offered as a sacrifice in worship to Jupiter or Zeus or Neptune or one of the other Greek gods. So what do you say? What do? You want to be part of the group. You want to help the reputation of God. You don't know how to figure all this out. Let me tell you the response of one of the workers, a guy who worked there for 3 years in a shop that made tents. His name was Paul. And here's what he wrote in 1 Corinthians 10:31. Whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God. So he didn't see the invitation or what was happening in Corinth as some sort of inevitable evil, but he saw everything that happened as a way to creatively enhance the reputation of God. Now, was that easy? Of course not. It was extremely difficult, was there then and is here now, but it is a key reason why we work, to glorify God. And, Paul said to the Corinthians, to represent God as ambassadors of Jesus. He wrote in 2 Corinthians 5:20, we are Christ's ambassadors as though God were making his appeal through us. So here's the deal. The moment we become Christians, we have a switch in citizenship. That may not seem all that apparent, but it's highly significant. So while all of our lives we have been citizens of earth and the country of birth, or the country to which we have been naturalized, at the moment of conversion to become a Christian, we become citizens of heaven. And another transaction takes place in that instant, that God then assigns us back to earth as his representatives or as his ambassadors, that we are to represent heaven here on earth. It's sort of like being an ambassador of the United States of America. Now, as you know, ambassadors are appointed by the President of the United States and confirmed by the United States Senate. An ambassador then moves to a foreign country, but is still an American, learns another language, speaks that language and eats that country's food, but still as an American, with an American accent and an American palate for taste. In that country, the ambassador treats the people of the host nation with dignity and respect, acknowledges their policies, but may have to differ from their policies because the ambassador always represents the president and the government of the United States of America. Some ambassadors get comparatively easy assignments. So you become the United States ambassador to Canada, or the United States ambassador to the United Nations. Then you can actually live in this country. But there are some who are assigned to become the ambassador of the United States to Baghdad, or Kabul, or Bogota. And that means then that you are constantly at risk, that you wear a bulletproof vest. It means that your family can't be with you, or if they are with you, that they are frightened because of the car bombers and the snipers and all of the risks that constantly surround them. Now, it's in that sense that Paul writes that we are therefore Christ's ambassadors, that we are the ambassadors of Jesus Christ to the Minneapolis schools, to Northwest Airlines, or to Pizza Hut, or the school where we are students, or the clients with whom we have a relationship in our business, that we have been assigned as ambassadors of Jesus. So just as the United States ambassador to Tokyo gets up in the morning and gets dressed and says, "Today I am the ambassador of the United States of America in this place," so we as Christians, we get up in the morning and we look in the mirror and we say, "Today I am the ambassador of Jesus Christ to the place where I work." So there we represent God, but there we also fulfill our calling. Now, I know that this is kind of a word from another generation. It used to be that instead of saying, what do you do or where do you work, that people would say, what's your vocation? Coming from the Latin word to call or calling. Now, that's far less said in the 21st century. Vocation in the Catholic Church most often refers to being a priest or joining a religious order. Among Protestants, there are references to the call of God to be a pastor or to be a missionary. But there's a problem with that type of terminology because it somehow implies to be a priest or belong to a religious order or to be a pastor or a missionary is somehow higher in the pecking order of God. And that's simply not true. That's not what the Bible teaches. The Bible teaches that we all have a call. It is primarily the call of Jesus to follow him. So Jesus says, follow me. Come on, follow me. And we say, okay, yes, I'll follow you. But then we say, well, like, where are we going, Jesus? And he says, we're going to work. And he names the place of employment where we then live out the call of Jesus. Now, for some of us, that may be a very easy place of employment. For others, it may be exceptionally difficult. But that is where we put steps and flesh to the verbal yes to the call of Jesus. Here's what Paul said when he talked about it in Ephesians 4:1-2. He says, as a prisoner for the Lord, I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you have received. Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. Now, this wasn't poetry. This wasn't a figure of speech. His job was jail. His job was to be a prisoner. If you go as a tourist to Rome, one of the places that your tour guide may take you is to the Mamertine prison near the Forum in the center of the old imperial city. And there you can actually go and see the dungeon where Paul was imprisoned. So his job at that time, his way of saying yes to the call of Jesus Christ, was as a prisoner. Now, were there some Christians at that time who answered the call in luxurious villas along the Mediterranean coast? Indeed, there were. Paul was simply saying, whatever the calling is where you live out being a follower of Jesus, do it in this way. Do it in a way that lives out the yes that you have verbalized by the actions that you accomplish in whatever place Jesus has given you to work. Now, most of these things have been centered on God, answers to the why work question. But it's even broader than that because we also work to serve others. Jesus said in Mark 10:45 that even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Virtually all jobs are serving somebody else. I kind of want to say it's 100%. There are no real jobs that are completely self-serving. We're always serving somebody, but I don't know, maybe there's something that I haven't thought of. So certainly the large majority. If you are a physician, you are serving your patients. If you are a pilot, you are serving your passengers. If you are a salesperson, you are serving your clients. If you are a teacher, you are serving your students. Wherever it may be, you are serving somebody else. And that's very Jesus-like, that our jobs are serving others and doing it in a way that is like Jesus. Many times that's really fun, because people are great and they are wonderful. And many times it is a total nightmare. Because whenever you get into any business of serving other people, there are strange people and weird people and sick people and dysfunctional people and people that do bizarre stuff. That's part of the deal. It was part of the deal for Jesus. While there were some that bowed down and worshiped him as the Son of God, there were others that spit in his face and called him the devil incarnate. And when you serve other people, that is the kind of mix that comes with the job, and that is part of being like Jesus. Serving others is a key reason why we work. But last on the list of why we work is to make a living. Hey, there are a lot of people that would put that first on the list. It is the practical necessity of getting a paycheck. It's providing food and clothes and shelter for oneself and for others. It's gathering resources so that with those resources we can be a blessing to others. What's intriguing is in the New Testament, getting a job that pays and using that money to provide for your family is considered a test of whether a person is really a Christian or not. 1 Timothy 5:8, if anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for his immediate family, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. So to not work and not get a paycheck and not provide for family is a renunciation of Jesus and of biblical and Christian truth. Work is an essential part of what it means to be a follower of Jesus. So we work hard. We work for doing this. It isn't that we luck out. It isn't that we seek wealth without work or luxury just for its own sake. I guess what I'm suggesting here is that we think of it like this, that when we go to work, we do it to be like God and to glorify God, to represent God, to fulfill our calling, to serve others, and we get paid for it. That's just the opposite of thinking, I go to work to get paid for it, and hey, while I'm there, maybe I could represent God or glorify God. Who knows? Maybe I could serve others or fulfill my calling. That's, from a Christian perspective, backwards. We do it for God and for others, and we get paid, rather than that we get paid, and then if there's any extra time or effort, we do it for God and others. It is even going so far as to say that while our paychecks may have imprinted on them ADP or the name of a bank, that the truth of it is that our paychecks really come with God's signature from the bank of heaven. All of this is to teach that our work is very important to God. How important? Well, actually, those people that count such things say that work is mentioned over 800 times in the Bible. And what's intriguing is that is more than the references to worship, music, praise, and singing combined. So we may be tempted to say worship is praising God, it's singing songs, and that's true, that's good. But if you want to count it statistically, the Bible would say that worship is more about our work than it is about worship and music and praise and singing in the traditional sense. Jesus appeared 132 times in the New Testament. 123 of those 132 times were in the marketplace. Jesus used parables as a primary tool for teaching. 52 parables in the New Testament, 45 of them were work-related. Jesus' life on earth was 33 years long. 3 years of that were spent teaching and performing miracles and healing people and what we think of as in his biographies in the New Testament. That's only 10% of his life. 90% of his life was spent as a child, an apprentice, and as a master carpenter in the carpenter shop of Nazareth. Jesus spent most of his life not as an itinerant rabbi preacher. He spent most of his life as a carpenter. And so for us, whether we work at home or at the office, whether there's a lot of interaction with others or very little, whether it is an easy job or an exceptionally difficult job, our work is not only important to us, our work is extremely important to God. We do it for him, and he helps us to do it well. It is perhaps the primary expression of who and what we are as Christians and as followers of Jesus. Father, you are a worker, a hard worker, and we want to be very much like you, so help us in our work to be God-like. May you take delight in the way we glorify and represent you. May we in our jobs have a sense of fulfillment of the calling of Jesus. And in addition to the paychecks that we need and the resources that are required, may we serve others for your glory, and in Jesus' name.